Hey there, I'm Christopher Schoenwald, and welcome to Life as a show intently focused on helping people find their professional pathway by exploring and unearthing the details of jobs from around the world. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to throw this out there. I have a channel over on YouTube, Life as a ... which basically hosts highlights from these audio conversations that I have with these great guests. They typically run 10 to 15 minutes, and they're there to kind of present a different vantage point. You know, for people that aren't into audio, aren't into podcasts, but are still looking for career advice, ideas, help, all that great stuff, send them over to YouTube. Like I said, Life as a ... And if you do get over there, I would love that like or subscribe. I mean, it's the best way to let that algorithm know that the content is worth sharing and should be out there. So anyway, I do thank you for letting me plug this a little bit, but I think it's about time to get into today's episode. Quite possibly one of the most well-known, well-established, and easily understood professions out there, at least in terms of form and function, would have to be that of sales. I mean, it's a way of professional life and living that's been around forever. And yet, it's a job that's continually written about, talked about, and one that evokes this range of emotion from those associated with it. Why? Well, there's certainly reasons, none greater than this transformative role it plays in capitalistic economies and how it drives commerce forward for businesses and organizations. Plus, it does kind of offer a fairly lucrative pathway for those who are able to master the art of it all. And this intrigue does extend further. Heck, you could even add the endless debates over what truly separates those who do it well and those who struggle with it. Well, today we're going to dive into all of this and learn about what it's like to base a career off of sales, as well as something called fractional sales. And you're going to hear from an individual who found her way into this world almost by accident, but now is all about facilitating and streamlining the art of sales for others. And her name is Leighann Lovely, and I couldn't be more pleased to introduce her to you, including her uber informative sales-based insights and commentary. So if you've ever considered this line of work, or considering it right now, you'll love what this conversation offers up. So let me give a quick rundown about Leighann and her background, and we can launch into it all. Leighann Lovely is the founder and owner of Love Your Sales, a fractional sales business offering everything a small to mid-sized business needs to launch their sales. From coaching, training, tools, and hiring the right people, she focuses on ensuring businesses have a clear path to success. Now, before launching her business, Leighann had a career in human resources that started nearly 2 decades ago, hoping to help people grow in their professional careers. However, as the early 2000s took a toll on the economy, corporate HR departments never recovered, and she kind of found herself looking for a new way to impact the world. And it was at that point Leighann made a shift to sales, which was over 10 years ago, and found herself marrying the two disciplines together by selling products that directly assisted HR departments. Around this time that she found her voice through a podcast she started called Let's Talk HR, Humanizing the Conversation. There, Leighann talks about her lifelong struggle with bipolar disorder, and topics hover over and around issues relating to the need for more conversations on mental health issues within the workplace. Now, in January of 2023 came the rise of Love Your Sales, followed a year later by the Love Your Sales podcast, as she saw a gap for the small to mid-sized companies looking to grow and scale. And finally, no stranger to award and accolade, Leighann was awarded the Marquis Who's Who in America in 2023. She's also won the President's Award multiple times in her career for closed business, and has been nominated by her peers for Networker of the Year in 2021 and Small Business of the Year in 2023. So with all of this noted, I'd like to welcome you to my conversation with Leighann Lovely. Yeah, so welcome to the program. How are you doing today, Leighann?
I'm doing great. How are you today, Christopher? Thank you so much, by the way, for having me on.
Oh, yeah, it's my pleasure. We were just speaking off air a little bit there, that in all of the episodes that I've covered here on Life as a, I haven't actually delved into the world of sales exclusively. So I'm thrilled to welcome you on the program and to dive into it all with you.
Yes, and I love sales, so
Perfect.
happy to be here.
Yeah, excellent. All right, well, I do have this first segment lined up. It's something called Coloring Wikipedia, and it's a segment where I just read off a definition which relates to the guest in some way. Now, I do have you down here for fractional sales, and a bit of bad news. Actually, Wikipedia didn't have an entry for this. I was a bit surprised. So I did sort of do some internet sleuthing, and I came to this website called Mind Racer Consulting, where they had this definition that I figured we could use. So let me just read that off, and then I'll invite you to make some comments. Does it sound okay?
Yeah.
All right, so here we go. Fractional sales. Fractional sales is when you bring in experienced professionals to help with different aspects of your sales process. Doing so saves money as you don't need to hire in-house employees for critical, strategic, or first-time sales tasks. Fractional sales also help you scale operations more efficiently and adjust support based on changing needs and budgets. There we go. Seems to be a bit of a nuts and bolts perspective on it, but is there anything that you'd like to add, emphasize, or even de-emphasize perhaps?
No, I mean, in a nutshell, that's what it is. It's bringing in somebody who is able to get up to speed quickly, and you're using them on an as needed basis or for an interim project. It's a true fractional individual who's coming in, great for companies who have a budget or a launch or a project. Often I'm called by companies that are, hey, we have an event coming up. We need lots of tickets or sponsorship spots to be sold quickly, but we don't want to pull our salespeople per se to go work on that because we don't want production to go down. So it's truly a come in, do this project for us, and then I'm gone. But it works in a variety of ways. And my business doesn't just do the fractional sales, but it's a great opportunity for businesses that, especially that are smaller, who don't necessarily have that big budget to bring in a heavy hitting salespeople, to have the opportunity to have a heavy hitting salesperson come in and help them scale quickly to be able to have that budget for a salesperson.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, first thoughts that come to mind were that it would be, like you just said, sort of appealing to small to mid-sized companies that are looking to maybe expand, but don't want to go all in on hiring people or bringing them on full time just yet. They maybe want to prove their business model. They want to prove the validity of their assumptions related to a particular project or otherwise. Does this happen for larger size companies as well?
Not extremely large companies. I haven't dealt with really large companies. I cater a lot more to the small to mid-sized market, but there are, I mean, multiple cases where I'm like, wow, that could have really been a great project for a business like mine, where a new product launch, for instance, and you hear this, a lot with, and I'm not going to name companies, but they're going into a brand new product launch. And so now they're shifting the focus of one of their salespeople saying, okay, we want you to now do this. That's not always appealing to a salesperson. It can be. There are some people who are like, yes, new project. But to some salespeople, they're like, well, I'm really great at this. I'm making a ton of money selling this. What happens if I shift and this product goes, wah, 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 wah. And, that has a direct impact on their commission.
Yeah. Well, they have their formula down,
So,
right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
correct,
upending that
correct,
could present some variables that, yeah, would give them pause to say the least.
correct. And again, large business, they're like, well, we'll just hire a new person. But then, it depends. Can you hire a person right now when you need them who's really going to be able to focus on that particular product launch, that understands exactly what you want and need to do? If you bring in, a fractional individual, you have that power to be able to go, okay, here is the scope, exactly the scope of this project. We want you to stay on point, and they can make a really quick impact.
It would seem to fit the day and age that we're within, like maximum flexibility for organizations and for companies. A lot of business models seem to be incorporating this, so I can see the attraction to it. This also might be an opportune time to learn a little bit more about your company. I understand that you're not just a fractional sales company; you do offer some other services as well. Perhaps you could, fill listeners in on a bit more. I know I did mention, a bit off the top about what you do and what your company's all about, but yeah, if you could fill us in a little bit more, that'd be great.
Love Your Sales is a, full really consulting service that comes in as a consultant to figure out where are your pain points with your sales and then help build on that. And through my partnerships, I have been able to build a model that obviously through a discovery with, said client, figure out where they truly need help. And what I have found in doing this is that where businesses, especially in the mid-sized market, they're not catered to, figuring out exactly what their pain point is and then identifying what they truly need is two different things. So I come in as a consultant to figure out, well, where are we struggling? And then help them either on a consulting basis to help them do it themselves, do it for them as that fractional sales individual. But sometimes it goes farther and it might be the tools that they're using. How do we build a pipeline for the long-term success of your business? I offer tools through a CRM offering that I have, my partnership with GenHead. I can also hire sales individuals. As I'm working with them, they may realize, oh, okay, you're doing so great. We want a permanent solution now. And that's very common that now we've gotten to a point where we have enough business that we can hire somebody. I'm also, with my HR background, capable of actually going out and recruiting for that company. And so with HR Fox, again, another business within a partnership within my business, I'm able to do that. And then it goes beyond that because I want to be a consultant in businesses for the long term. And as companies grow, they then need that nurturing of the continual training, the leadership and development training. And so we also offer, the ability to help them grow and scale long term. My goal is not to, just go and sell something. My goal is to be a partner in these organizations for the long term. And because I come in at an early stage, I understand their growth. I understand their journey. I spend time with them figuring out what their vision is for the future. And so we're able to then, assist with the training and development.
Okay. I mean, it sounds a lot to me like relationship building, through and through, which, in a way is basically sales, right? Like an offshoot of what
Yes,
sales really is all about.
it's 100%. Sales today that's at the core of it. You're going out and if you're doing it right, you're making true relationships. Often these relationships become friends of people that I've now known for the long haul and I've seen them grow and succeed. And, it's the reason I have the partnerships in my business.
Well, I do have this other segment here, and it might be a nice chance to jump into it and to add some further clarity in terms of the work that you're involved in and as it relates to your business. And it's a day in the life. The segment is as it sounds. I'd love to hear a little bit more about, what takes up your day.
People ask me, like, what do you do all day? My husband even will ask me, what do you do all day?
Here's your
I'm like,
opportunity.
well, right, right. I couldn't tell you what a typical day is going to look like because I do sell multiple products. There are some days where I'm selling coaching services on a global basis, where I'm speaking to people that are in Japan, where I'm speaking to people who are in, multiple countries because I'm selling a certain product. And then there are days where all I'm doing is meeting with my coaching clients who are, solopreneurs trying to navigate the world of sales. And then on another day, I'm talking to my staffing clients about, the quality of candidates that we're submitting to them. And then I'm also doing a demo for a CRM solution that they can help create and build their pipeline of long-term sales leads. So I don't often have a typical, and then on top of that, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm also doing accounting and all the other stuff that goes along with that. But so I don't have a typical day. What I will tell you is that every day I'm selling something. Every day I'm building relationships. Every appointment that I take has a purpose and a reason. And every single one of them is about creating mutual understanding for how we can assist each other, help each other, and grow from there.
I think it speaks to that point of entrepreneurship and sometimes the perceived messiness of it all, right? You're doing so many different tasks and they're so varied. But as you just sort of outlined, it all comes together under this umbrella of sales, relationship building. So it kind of brings it all together. And also the point too, then speaking with so many different professionals and entrepreneurs on this program, is those varied tasks are oftentimes what ultimately deliver levels of satisfaction and fulfillment. It's the breaks from the mundane, what it truly offers. And as hairy as that can be at times and stressful, of course, I get all that. It also sort of works on the other side where it does deliver this, like I said, fulfillment. So I'm guessing that would be the case for you too.
I absolutely love almost everything I do. I can't wait until one day I don't ever have to look at spreadsheets and accounting stuff. Everything that I do, I love it. I love, building out the curriculums for my courses. I love everything because it all comes down to how can I help others be better at my area of genius? How can I help level them up in the realm of sales? And that fulfills me. I like to see others succeed where I myself have had success.
Yeah.
And I think that's also comes down to, being a servant leader. If you want to, you want to be really great at something, you have to be willing to give back to your community. And that sometimes is the time that, your time, your personal time. If you want to find your true fulfillment, that's where it lies. Being willing to really give yourself to what you love. And I truly found myself when I stepped into this role.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And it's really valuable insight for listeners to hear that. I think, oftentimes people might just assume that a profession is just like the nuts and bolts aspects of the work itself. But there's this whole other level to it, that really does take over. And if you kind of open yourself up to that, again, that's where fulfillment is going to be derived. So yeah, I really appreciate that insight there. I do have another segment that I would like to jump into here, Leighann, called Pathways. And it is as it sounds. I mean, the aim here is to kind of uncover how people made their way into their professional work. Now, I understand, and as I mentioned off the top, that originally you were based within HR, and then a bit of a downturn in the economy and how that affected, HR departments really shifted you towards doing something else or almost needing to do something else. But what I'd be curious to hear about is what attracted you to fractional sales and entrepreneurship in particular.
You know, I grew up in a sales family. And I think it was a surprise to a lot of people that I didn't follow that path to begin with. But I will having a lot of self-awareness now, a lot more now than I did, back in my younger days, is the reason I think that I didn't start in sales first. So yes, the downturn in the economy, I went into HR because I wanted to help people. We glamorized, the different jobs that we decide to go into, right? At that time, HR was, you become an HR professional, you get to mentor and coach people, you get to, and then 2008 hit. And then I was out of a job. And then I'm floundering around trying to figure out, well, what do I want to be when I grow up? Because nobody's going to hire the brand new corporate HR girl when we're downsizing every HR department across everywhere. So I one day, after floundering around for a long time, I walked in to the house after work one day and I said to my then boyfriend, now husband, I'm going to go into sales. And he looked at me and he goes, yeah, right. And I'm like, no, I'm going to go into sales. And he's like, okay, good luck with that. And I'm like, but you don't understand. You're going to have to pay all the bills.
It gets better.
And he's like, oh, for how long? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, because nobody's going to hire an HR lady to be a salesperson. Like, these are two different things. And he's like, okay. But he bought into it. And I started selling makeup at a Sam's Club. And then the owner of a business walked up and he said, I need somebody with your tenacity, with your personality, working at my company to breathe new life into it. And I was like, yeah, sell my, buy my makeup. He was serious. He hired me. And that's where I cut my teeth. And I loved it. I loved the excitement. I made a game out of it. It would be like, okay, how many phone calls can I make until I get somebody on the phone? And that's where I really got that itch for that entrepreneurial spirit, right? Like all of the sudden, I have the ability to write my own paycheck. Like if I can sell 10 more of these, I can go on that trip that I want to go on, right? It's the only profession in the world where you get to choose how much you make depending on how much you're willing to work. Not that I'm advocating that everybody should go out there and, you know, work until they're dead, but it is truly the only profession in the world that you are paid exactly what you're worth. For what you put in, you get out. So I, then went into selling this and selling that. And my husband kept saying to me, you should run your own business. I should start a business and you should be my salesperson. And I'm like, no, 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 corporate America, I'm going to stay in corporate. Well, one day it just fell on me. I had two job offers and I'm like, well, you guys can't pay me enough. And then I went, wait, I'll take them both. I'll do this as a contractor and I'll do this part-time. And lo and behold, I had a business and it made sense. I started as a fractional salesperson and all of a sudden all of the pieces started coming together. And I'm like, wow, I could actually run my own business and people would hire me to sell their stuff. And it's exciting and I love it. And I get to sell different things to different people at different times. And it's never a dull day. I don't get bored of selling the same thing. And I get to really, really get to know people. I have the privilege to really get to know people and understand them and support them in the way that I always wanted to be able to do that at other jobs. But as a salesperson, you sell it, you hand it off, and you're like, well, how is that client doing? And you go back and you make sure that they're doing well, but you're not intimately involved in all of the projects because you have the, production team and so that was probably a long-winded answer, but
No, 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 it's great. I mean, it paints that picture of how, people, potentially can make their way into it. And a couple things that stand out to me is, one is this notion of how you almost gamified the experience of sales, early on and what a joy that was for you. And again, I think using a word that you'd already mentioned, self-awareness of, understanding that that was something that brought you some joy and pursuing that further. And then that led into a few different opportunities, which ultimately pushed you into this track of entrepreneurship, which also, too, is the second point I'd like to raise is that my assumption here is that like sales and entrepreneurship are fairly closely aligned, probably more so than any other type of professional work that you could have, right? Like what you put into it ultimately is what's going to show on the other side in terms of reward and fulfillment and all these different things. So I could see how that transition wouldn't be as big of a leap, perhaps, as going from some sort of other job to entrepreneurship.
most entrepreneurs wake up wildly disappointed when they realize that they have to be salespeople. So when you're already a salesperson, the leap from, oh, I'm a salesperson to an entrepreneur, you're like, well, yeah, if I was doing my job really well for this company, I already have that mindset because great salespeople have entrepreneurial spirit already in them because they're already thinking of what do I need to do to brand myself to be the expert that everybody comes to for this product, even if it's the product that a corporation is selling. That's what really makes the great salesperson versus the okay salesperson. The salesperson can do really, really well, but they're not all in because it's not theirs. Well, what if they were all in? It may not be their company, but think of it as if it was your little mini business. You go all in, that's when you become great. That's when people start to think of you as the expert and they're like, wow. I mean, there were people who used to think that I owned my own business long before I did. They're like, wait, you don't own the company? And I'm like, no, I don't own the company. They're like, oh, I always thought you owned it. And I'm like, oh,
You've been growing into it so much so that, yeah, okay. Speaks to that point, though, for sure, for sure. And there's another follow-up question as well. I mean, based on your background, again, initially in HR and then sales and also entrepreneurship, so all of those different sort of work experiences are people related, relationship related. I'm guessing that this was always part of your just makeup within your own youth, and if you can, reflect back on those earlier days, would you say that you were always sort of aligned for a position that was going to be working intensely with others?
Yes, let me say first, yes. But let me premise this by saying that I don't know that if you would have asked me when I was 18 or even 20, like, are you, the people person? Are you going to go into a person-centric? I originally started going to school for computer programming. Everybody's like, "Oh, you're so smart with, math, and you're really good with, the abstract thinking. You should be a coder or go into computer technology." I could do it, but it drained me. I'm an extrovert through and through, right? So now let me premise this by saying part of the reason that I became so hypersensitive to people is because of my own mental health struggles, which I'm very open about and I talk about a lot. I really got into the study of humans and trying to understand what makes humans tick when I was officially diagnosed with a mental health diagnosis with bipolar disorder. And that is, I think, what really ended up being the true shift to wanting to be in a people-centric type job. Because I really started looking inward at myself going, okay, what makes me tick? Okay, what makes that person tick? Why do they make decisions the way they make decisions?
Mm,
And that's, I think, what really was kind of the thing that shifted when I was younger, going into HR, trying to study people. Where better to study people than in the workplace when you've got people coming to you?
yeah, yeah.
And at the same time, doing self-discovery.
Okay. And you've already mentioned, already a couple times over about wanting to help people, having that deep desire to
Yes.
do so. And through your own experiences and perhaps struggles along the way, I can see how that would connect. Guessing that was a big part of it, also
Yeah.
matching up to who you were.
Absolutely. And during that time, I mean, we're talking 20 years ago, it wasn't something that people talked about, right?
Yeah.
So my mental health wasn't something that people talked about, but it wasn't something that in often cases, especially in the recruiting world, corporate HR, I could identify with it and I could see it. And people felt comfortable with me. And often I would become aware of other people's struggles before, other members in the HR department would be aware of it.
Mm,
And I like to be the somebody who is like, it's okay. I wanted to be an advocate for those who were not being advocated for. It was just, again, this is a
yeah.
sensitive subject over 20 years ago that you didn't talk about this stuff. You didn't tell your employer that the reason you can't come to work is because you're having a mental breakdown or your depression is you call in sick. I'm sorry, I'm sick. And then they go, "Oh, do you have a doctor's excuse?" And you're like, from my mental health
Right. Right.
doctor. And they're like, "No, no, because you don't want to send that in." And so, yeah, I mean, that was human resource was definitely a place that I wanted to be. I wanted to make some changes, but unfortunately, with what all of the things that were happening in the world at that time, it wasn't the path I ended up taking. And that's okay.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, while we're on the topic, maybe we can shift into this other segment of Q&A discovery. We can just continue this back and forth. In terms of mental health awareness and issues and whatnot, again, I can see why, you are quite passionate about this based off of your own experiences and I'm guessing struggles, early on. And with this, how well are small to mid-size companies doing with it right now? Again, it's on the radar for big corporations and whatnot, but again, in your experience, small to mid-sized companies, how are they, faring with all of this? How are they handling things?
In my opinion, I think that they're doing better than the large because there are more people, especially the small, there are more people out there talking about it and having conversations in general settings. And you go to a networking meeting, they are more willing to have conversations just in an open setting. And I came out publicly, I don't even know how many years ago now it was, publicly, saying I have bipolar disorder. And I remember when I told people that I was going to do that, they're like, "Are you ready for the ramifications?" And I'm like, "I absolutely am ready for the ramifications." And the small business community was the first people to say, "That is awesome. I'm so proud of you." And by the way, I also suffer from depression, and I've been seeing a therapist for years. And oh, and by the way, and I was like, wow, like I'm pretty sure that like a third of this room, is in therapy, and like everybody is now telling me about their mental health. It is wildly more accepted in those small communities, and not that it's not accepted in large companies, but they're struggling to figure out like, well, how do we educate middle management? How do we educate the higher ups? How do we educate all of these different levels when we've done it done it this way for so long? Whereas the smaller companies, they're like, oh, yeah, my son also has, he's on the spectrum, or, he's neurodiverse. And it's one of those things that it's much easier to be able to just gather everybody together and be like, okay, we have a new employee starting. He's asked for special accommodations. We just want to explain it really quick. And everybody goes, oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas at a really large company, everybody's like, why all of a sudden is this person getting the desk closest to the bathroom when I asked for that 10 years ago and I never got.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the rules, the protocols with large organizations are going to make things much, much different than a small and mid-sized company, which are a lot more nimble and flexible and able to shift things a lot faster, more times than not.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And it's not that large corporations are not rolling with this and shifting with it and becoming more aware of it. It's just making a change within those are.
Yeah. It just takes time. And
It does.
okay.
It absolutely does.
As far as how you're advancing this cause, again, it's a meaningful one to you. Is it basically through your sharing of your own struggles with it, or are you involved in some other activities also?
It's just basically through my sharing. Prior to becoming an entrepreneur, I was like, well, how can I get more involved? And then obviously your time, goes like this, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, I can't get involved in but I openly share my struggles. I have been for a long time now. I'm a huge advocate to, others in my community who have reached out to me on a personal basis just to say, hey, I need somebody to talk to. And then on a professional basis, how do I handle this situation? And I've had friends, I've had businesses call me and say, we don't know what to do. This is the situation. And because I've got the HR background as well as, being a consultant on the sales side, I'm like, okay, please tell me you didn't just fire the person. Like, here's the steps you need to take. I'm glad that you reached out to let me know what was going on. And let's do this properly to make sure that, this person isn't being discriminated against, but that your business is also continuing to thrive and not taking a hit because they may have to be out for 6 weeks going through whatever program in order to get back on their feet. And it's a major shift, but we've also had more people struggling with, alcoholism, and I shouldn't say more, but more people are talking about the fact that, hey, I have to go on leave because, I was sober for 4 years and I just had a relapse. And we're seeing that a lot because of what just transpired with the world too. The isolation with the whole pandemic. So
Yeah. Well, I commend you for sharing that because it couldn't be easy. I'm guessing. I'm sure there are some inherent challenges with that, but at the same time, like the work that you're doing in that sense is probably inspiring a lot of others and professional level, helping other organizations that as you just outlined, but then also on a personal level too. And it would seem that you're well positioned for this in terms of the work that you're involved in. I mean, sales, we've spoken about already, is relationship driven. So you already have these existing relationships, and seemingly you'd be, it might be a little bit easier to broach some of these topics at different points or to have people speak to you about them. So yeah, I can see how all that comes together. But I do have this other question. I'd like to return back to the sales side a little bit. And presumably, you subscribe to this belief that sales need to be something that individuals are all in on. I mean, the name of your company, Love Your Sales, kind of speaks to this point. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about your philosophy towards sales as it relates to that. I mean, this notion of being all in order to succeed or thrive within that space.
Well, first, I want to start out by saying that regardless of whether or not you think you're a salesperson, everybody sells at one point in their life. And even now, again, I go back to my husband who's like, I'm not a salesperson. I hate salespeople. That's constant. I'm like, you do it every day. You negotiate, in some way, you are a salesperson. And whether it's you're negotiating with your daughter to eat one more piece of broccoli, to have a piece of candy, you are in one way or another using sales techniques in your life, right? It's just whether or not you decide that you want to do it as a profession. And if you step into wanting to do it as a profession, yes, there is a difference to that. But we as humans start from the day that we're born selling in one way or another. It's the baby in the crib that cries and realizes that mommy and daddy come running. As soon as they start crying, they have now figured out that, wow, I can sell this to them. Like if I just cry, they come running. We as humans, it's an inherent thing that we do. But in order to do it as a profession and to become great, to go from a good salesperson to a great salesperson, you have to be all in. Let me back up. You have to truly, really, really love people and desire, not just want, but desire to help people. It goes back to being that servant leader. To be a servant, sales individual, servant, you have to truly desire to help, which means that you have to listen and really create that relationship. If you're not listening, if you're not hearing, if you're not then repeating back to confirm that you understand, you're never going to go from being that good salesperson to that great salesperson. And that really is the difference, between the person who can sell, oh, I can go and sell this pen, to that person who can become that awesome, amazing, true, great salesperson. And great salespeople have a defining difference that they care. They want that person who buys from them to be happy and to never look back and go, oh, I just got the wool pulled over my eyes.
I mean, this might be an
And
impossible question. Sorry to interrupt here, but in terms of like distilling success within sales down to say the top 2 or 3 qualities of a person, that they need to exhibit, what would you say they are? I mean, you listed off several there, from relationship building to, listening, a few others, but what would you say are the most critical ones?
it's listening. It's the hardest thing for any human to do because we listen. A lot of people listen to half the information and then start calculating their response.
Hmm.
We start going, okay, when can I talk? When is it my opportunity to be able to speak next? And if you're not the kind of person who's like, oh, I want to jump into this conversation, you start listening. And if it's not of interest to you, or you're not like, you start to kind of like think about, oh, did I turn the washing machine on, or did I turn the stove off? If you are not one of those people who can truly listen to hear, listen to learn, you're never going to be able to be a great salesperson. You have to like really be able to shut down everything else that's going on and listen, because often what people are saying, what they want, is not what they need. And in order to be a great salesperson, you have to be able to listen to what they're saying they want, tell it back to them, and then decipher whether or not what they want equals what they need in order to solve the problem that they're explaining that they have. Because if you were to tell me, Christopher, that you want something, but then in that same conversation, you're explaining the problems, and your want and your problem are 2 different things,
Yeah.
I can't provide you with a solution that is ultimately going to fix whatever's happening. The number one thing that a salesperson has to be able to do is listen. That was the hardest thing for me when I was young. I was the kind of person who was like, wait, when can I talk? And salespeople love to talk.
Yeah. Yeah. At least that's the perception. But I like this insight that you're providing because it's flipping that assumption on its head. You're right. I mean, as you're outlining it, it's absolutely critical. I mean, the devil's in the details, right? You're really going to find out whether or not you can serve that person's needs or not potentially. And even that's sometimes maybe a good outcome where, again, we're returning to the point of relationship building where you might not be able to serve their needs right now, but down the line, you come back around and you're able to do so. So yeah, I think that's terrific insight there. As far as like the level of fulfillment that you're getting from your work, we've spoken to a few different points now, the entrepreneurial side of it, and having all these different tasks, all these different responsibilities. We've already spoken about, some of the personal side of your work and how you're helping others and, speaking about sensitive topics and advancing those issues with others. I can see fulfillment being a big part of it there. But I guess in considering all of this, how would you say that you are deriving a sense of satisfaction from the work that you're involved in?
That is a great question. Ultimately, it comes down to I enjoy and I love to see my clients when they have that aha moment. And, and it sometimes takes a long time for them to, you have those little moments where they're like, oh, that makes so much sense. Like, why couldn't I get there? But it takes a while where all of a sudden they sit back and go, oh, oh, yes. And you're like, we figured it out. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs who've come from high level corporate roles. One in particular, very, very high up, had a marketing team, had everything in place, and now small business. And when I work with him, a lot of it is, okay, who are you catering to? What is your ideal? And often it's like, okay, you're now catering to small business, but everything that you do and everything that you say sounds like big corporate. And he's like, oh, yeah, yeah. Why do I do that? Like, because that is what you've been living and breathing. We have to unlearn your behaviors, right? And when we get to those points where he's like, oh, okay, I've got it. I've got it. And he goes, but why can't I do that for myself? And I'm like, because you're too close to it. And we have those aha moments together. That for me, I'm like, yes. We finish up our, appointment and I'm like, man, that was fun. Like I have so much fun doing that with my clients. And the funny thing is here, Christopher, is that I can't do it for myself.
Hmm.
I will sit and work on my own work. I will sit out and do and I sit there and go, why can't I do this? We can't do as entrepreneurs for ourselves what we can do so brilliantly for others. We're too close to it.
Hmm.
But, and I have a coach too. I have a coach where I'm like, here, can you walk me through my own work, my own sales? I can't seem to do this. That's why we hire. And that was one of the greatest pieces of advice that I was ever given. The greatest people in the world are the ones who know what they're great at and hire others to do what they're not so great at.
Yeah.
And it's not that, they're not great. It's that they're smart enough to realize that they're not good at other things. And that's really hard for some entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, also too, I think it always helps, even if you are solid at something or you consider yourself, good at it, is getting that outside perspective because there's always different ways of tackling something or an added perspective that can make you, good to great to fabulous, that there's always areas for growth also. So whether, you are excellent or whether you're not good at something, I think there's always something to be said for, having that courage and also willingness to seek out advice, seek out extra input, no matter where you're at on that spectrum of, performance. So yeah, I think that's a really valuable insight as well. And that unto itself. I do have this other segment. We are moving on a pretty good clip here, a water cooler story. And I'd love to hear, some sort of story relating to your work or your business that has some meaning to you.
I I thought about this. You and I talked about this beforehand, and I wasn't sure what direction I was going to go, whether or not I was going to go into this triumphant moment. But I actually am going to go into one of my failures
Hmm.
because I think that our greatest learning comes from times where we have little failures.
Yeah.
And early on, I started working with a client, and I made the mistake of not asking enough questions, not listening, but also not seeing what was in between what she was telling me.
Hmm.
And so we went forward with a launch for her business on sales, and we completely failed. And what I learned from that was that I did not do enough due diligence to figure out what we were missing. And I didn't speak up enough to tell her that I didn't feel that she was ready. And this is an early on, obviously an early on mistake for me, but I'm still working with her.
Yeah. That says a lot
Crazy
right
enough
there.
is that I'm still working with her. And now all of the pieces have come together. And what we realized was that she wasn't ready for the launch. The product wasn't complete. It wasn't complete. And so why I'm telling this story is because one, I created a very solid relationship with her in the beginning, but I missed pieces because I'm human.
Yeah.
And the reason that we're still working together is because we created that really strong bond for me to be able to go back and say, we missed the mark.
Hmm.
But here's why we missed the mark. I wasn't listening to read between the lines that this wasn't the finished product. And here's what we're going to do going forward. We're going to wait for this product to be whole and to have that true proof of concept, because we had a half proof of concept. And then we're going to relaunch this. And so this was a huge growth for me, early on in my business, for me to go, okay, I made the mistake of what I teach everybody else to do, which is really, really listen, hear, verify, go back, and make sure you understand your clients. Make sure you understand what your vision of your clients is. Because if I would have understood her vision long term, I would have realized that her product wasn't whole.
Hmm. Hmm. I love that. I think that story there speaks to many of the points that we've been discussing already. Like you said, listening, relationship building, and it really crystallizes the importance of those aspects. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I think listeners are really going to appreciate that and derive a great sense of learning from that. So yeah, I think it was fantastic. Well, we do have this very last segment here, our crystal ball segment, and it is as it sounds. We're looking towards the future, trends, predictions, so on and so forth. And I mean, I really should just be renaming the segment the AI segment, because that's invariably where these conversations go once we enter into this point. But all the same, I'm still going to ask an AI based question because I think what people want to know, and it's fascinating. This is a time of change and all that AI represents. So, as far as sales and AI, I understand that you've already started integrating certain elements within your own business. So I'd love to hear about how we could expect sales to change based on the influence of AI. And then the second part of the question is going to be centered on like what aspects of sales do you think are immune to AI? They're not going to change very much.
So, yes, my organization, my company does utilize AI today. And we have a highly sophisticated AI tool through GenHead that, creates buyer ready lead lists that we actually then percolate and bring to actually, setting appointments. And we also utilize that in our actual CRM that we have, and in a variety of different ways. That is only going to get more intelligent. It's a custom designed AI tool that GenHead has actually created. Again, it's only going to get more intelligent with the way that you go onto somebody's website and you use the little widget to talk with them. Those are becoming customized based on the actual person's responses. Sounds more like the business owners, the way that they talk. That is going to continue to evolve, get better, get more intelligent, which is scary. At the same time, I think that marketing is going to continue to be more AI driven. In sales, you can't fake relationships. An AI cannot take the place of the actual salesperson. However, on the back end, there is a lot that can be driven to bring somebody basically almost up to that appointment. There is so much that is going to evolve so that people are basically, coming to you. And I hear people say, oh, cold calling is dead. It's not. It may look different in 10 years. We may not actually be physically picking up the phone and calling people the way that we do today. People barely answer their phone now. It's just going to evolve into text messaging or going to networking meetings and walking up to somebody and saying, hey, let's do a one-on-one and talk about how we can help each other. And then again, you're never going to be able to eliminate that physical person saying, let's sit down and talk about how we can solve your problem.
The relationship component, right? Like that's the thing
correct.
that AI is not going to be coming in and taking over.
In 30 years, I don't know.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, theoretically, like the technology would probably be there, but like I don't know, maybe I'm a traditionalist in the sense that like I just don't see where like that human to human relationship is ever going to be like devalued to the point where somebody could have that level of intimacy with a robot or you know what I mean? Like I just that's tough. I
got my first cell phone when I was 18. I never imagined that I would be able to get in the car and have, sales calls while I'm driving to pick up my daughter from school. But again, I'm 43 years old. I could not have possibly imagined where we would be today, that I'd be having a conversation with somebody who's in Japan while I'm sitting here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We have evolved so much. I can't predict what the world would look like when my daughter's my age. But the idea that relationships would be boiled down to, hey, I want to buy this. I'm going to go and talk to a robot about, is it possible? Yeah, it's absolutely possible. Nowadays, I can go on Amazon and tomorrow have all of my paper products delivered to me or whatever it is that I need. I never imagined that would also be a thing. And yet it is.
Yeah, very true. Very true. And it could maybe it could come down to the type of sales. Maybe that's where it evolves to eventually. Certain things are going to be handled or could be potentially handled completely by AI itself, whereas others, you're going to want that human touch, or you're going to want that relationship there. So yeah, it's interesting all the same, but it might be a nice point to draw things to a close here, Leighann. But I have thoroughly enjoyed this, and I feel as though I've definitely gained a deeper sense of understanding and appreciation for the world that you live within, and I'm sure listeners are really going to appreciate it as well. So thanks so much for taking some time and doing the program.
I really appreciate it. I can't thank you enough for having me on. It's been an awesome conversation.
Now, for those interested in learning more about Leighann and her work, you can do so via LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. And for reference, all of this information, including links, will be in the show notes. And if you like today's show, please be sure to tell a friend and share. To show further support, you can always rate, review, and subscribe wherever you access your podcast. And lastly, as I did mention off the top, head on over to YouTube. I do have that channel, Life as a ... which hosts highlights from the main audio recordings. And if you do make it over there, I would love that like or subscribe. It's the best way to let that algorithm know that the content does matter and should be out there. And finally, don't forget to join us on the next episode of Life as a, where we'll continue to explore and unearth the details of professions and the people behind them. I'm your host, Christopher Schoenwald. Until next time, stay curious about life and living.